At 5 a.m., my captain pounded on my door and said 5 words, "Don't wear your uniform today." I laughed in his face. I'd worn that uniform through gunfights, funerals, 3 tours overseas. I had no idea that by noon, wearing it would almost get me killed. At 5 a.m., my captain pounded on my door and said 5 words, "Don't wear your uniform today." I laughed in his face. I'd worn that uniform through gunfights, funerals, 3 tours overseas. I had no idea that by noon, wearing it would almost get me killed. My name is Armin, and for 8 years that uniform was the only thing that made sense to me. I've watched friends come home under flags. I've stood on airstrips in the rain, saluted coffins, then gone back to patrol an hour later. Danger, for me, was always over there, some desert, some ruined street, some foreign village where nobody spoke my language. That morning was the first time I realized the most dangerous place I could wear my uniform was my own city. When I opened my door, I didn't recognize my captain at first. He wasn't in uniform either. No cap, no badges, just a plain dark jacket thrown over a t-shirt and a face that looked like it hadn't slept all night. His knuckles were red from pounding my door. His eyes kept flicking down the hallway, like he expected someone to be listening. "I'm serious," he said before I could even say good morning. "No uniform today. Not on the street, not on the bus, not under a jacket. Don't put it on." I rubbed my eyes, half awake, more annoyed than scared. "Sir, with respect, since when do we hide?" I asked. "If there's trouble, we're the ones who are supposed to show up in uniform, remember?" His jaw clenched. For a second I thought he was going to shout, the way he did on the training ground. Instead his voice dropped to a whisper. "This isn't about courage," he said. "It's about being a target. Orders are coming, but they're late. I'm telling you now. Don't wear it." He took a breath, looked me straight in the eyes. "Promise me, Armin." I had never heard my captain ask anyone to promise him anything. He gave orders. People obeyed. That was it. I should have realized, just from that something was badly wrong. Instead, I shrugged. "Fine, sir. Just for today," I muttered. Anything to get him to stop banging on my door at 5 in the morning. He studied my face for another second, like he was trying to decide if I'd lie to him, then nodded once and stepped back. "You've done enough for the flag," he said quietly. "Today, let it protect you for a change." And then he turned and walked down the corridor, his boots unnaturally quiet on the concrete. I watched him go, still half convinced this was some kind of test. Some new psychological drill about obedience, or how we reacted under vague orders. If it was a test, I failed it twice that morning. First, by not taking him seriously. And second, by stepping outside my door at all. By 6:30, the sky above the city was the color of old bruises. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. I made coffee, stared at my open locker. My uniform hung there, perfectly ironed, name tag catching the weak yellow light. Next to it, folded on a shelf, were my civilian clothes, faded jeans, a gray t-shirt, a jacket I'd bought on discount. For 8 years, putting on civilian clothes had meant leaving the job behind. Putting on the uniform meant becoming the person people saluted, the person children stared at with wide eyes on the bus. That morning, for the first time, it felt backwards. The uniform on its hanger looked exposed, like a bright flag in the middle of a minefield. I checked my phone. 17 unread messages in the unit group chat. Half of them were memes from last night. The other half were news links. "Turn on the TV," one of them said. I did. Every channel showed the same thing. Crowds. Streets I knew, markets, junctions near the government buildings, choked with people waving placards, shouting slogans I couldn't hear. A red banner at the bottom of the screen screamed. Protests turned violent after Night Temi raid. Soldiers accused of civilian deaths. They showed shaky cell phone footage, smoke, running figures, a woman's scream. A soldier's shadow in a doorway, muzzle flashes, then static. I felt my stomach twist. We'd all heard rumors about last night's operation, that it had gone bad, that the intel was wrong, that the people who died weren't the ones who were supposed to. On screen, an anchor was saying words like anger, outrage, accountability. But what I heard underneath was simpler. They're coming for you. I muted the TV and stared again at my locker. If I wore the uniform out of the building, I wouldn't just be Armin today. I would be that soldier in the blurry video, to every angry stranger who happened to be close enough. My captain's voice echoed in my head. Today, it's about being a target. I picked up the uniform, just to feel it in my hands. It was heavier than I remembered. For the first time in years, I put it back on the hanger and closed the locker, leaving it there. I pulled on my jeans and t-shirt instead. For the first time since basic training, I felt underdressed walking out of my own room. The city smelled different that morning. Usually, when I stepped outside the barracks, I smelled tea stalls, dust, exhaust fumes, the faint sweat of early commuters. That day, there was a bitter tang in the air, burned plastic, half-extinguished smoke, like something had already started without me. Down on the street, traffic crawled. I passed two other soldiers from my building on the stairs. Both were in full uniform. Both stared when they saw me in civilian clothes. "Late for duty, Sergeant," one of them joked, lifting an eyebrow. "Orders," I said. "From Captain Malik. No uniform today." They glanced at each other, then back at me. "Funny," the taller one said. "We just saw him heading to HQ in full gear." For a moment, doubt punched me in the chest. Had I misunderstood? Was I the only one sneaking around in civilian clothes like a coward while everyone else suited up? Then I remembered the way my captain's voice had shaken. I remembered the way he'd said, "Promise me." "They'll explain it at briefing." I lied. "Maybe I'm going somewhere else." They shrugged and pushed past me into the street, green fabric catching the early light like they were made of it. I watched them walk towards the bus stop. A group of men standing near the corner fell quiet as the two uniforms passed. Their eyes followed the soldiers. One of them spat on the ground, very slowly. The bus pulled up. When the doors opened, I could hear someone inside saying, loud enough for the street, "Why are they even allowed on public buses today?" My friends pretended not to hear. They climbed on, backs still straight, hands tied on the railings. The doors hissed shut. The bus pulled away. I shoved my hands in my pockets and started walking the other way, heart beating too fast for such a short walk. My plan had been simple. Go to my parents' place across town, stay there till things calmed down, then report back to base. By 8 o'clock, I realized there was no such thing as across town anymore. The whole city was one mood, and that mood was close to breaking. Shops had their shutters half pulled down. Posters were plastered over walls, sprayed across bus stops, painted onto the road itself. Some showed the faces of the people killed in last night's operation. Others just had one word painted over and over in angry red: murderers. Every time I saw a uniform, the air around it seemed to thicken. At one junction, I watched a pair of traffic cops in their white caps try to direct cars around a stalled truck. A man on a motorcycle slowed down just long enough to shout a string of curses at them, then sped away. The younger cop flinched like he'd been slapped. The older one pretended not to hear. Twice, I caught people staring at me, then saw their eyes move to my plain t-shirt, my jeans, and slide away again. To them, I was just another civilian, maybe a student, maybe an office worker. They had no idea that the ID card in my wallet carried the same emblem they were burning on posters. By 9, the crowds thickened. Chants began to roll down the streets in waves, bouncing off the buildings. I couldn't always make out the words, but the rhythm was familiar. I'd led crowds like this in other countries. I'd watched them turn from people with signs into people with stones. I should have gone back to the barracks then, stayed behind the wall, let the day burn out without me. Instead, I kept walking. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was pride. Maybe some stupid part of me still believed wearing civilian clothes made me untouchable. I kept telling myself, they're angry at the uniform, not at you. You're fine. By 10:30, I knew I was lying to myself. News alerts kept buzzing on my phone. Protests block main highway. Clash between crowd and riot police near Central Square. Unconfirmed reports of soldiers surrounded by mob. One message stopped me in my tracks. It was from a friend in logistics, stationed near the central bus terminal, the same terminal my route home passed through. Word is they're planning something big at noon. If you're out, stay away from here. Especially in uniform. I stared at the screen, then at the street sign above my head. I was 3 blocks from the terminal. My captain hadn't just been guessing. He'd known. Part of me wanted to turn around and run the other way. Another part, the part that had kept me volunteering for every risky mission overseas, whispered, "If something is going to happen to your people, shouldn't you be there?" I ended up doing what soldiers do when they don't know what to do. I compromised. I kept walking towards the terminal, but slower, sticking to the side streets, keeping my head down. By 11:45, the noise hit me before I saw the crowd. The terminal was a gigantic concrete mouth, swallowing and spitting out buses all day. Today it was choking. Hundreds of people packed the entrance, spilling onto the road, climbing over barriers, standing on rooftops. Placards bobbed above their heads like waves. Every few seconds, a chant rose up, crashed, then rose again. I ducked into the shadow of a doorway and watched. Lines of police in helmets formed a thin wall at the main gate. Behind them, I could see flashes of army green, soldiers, my unit, moving like pieces on a board. They were trying to form a cordon around a row of buses. Then I saw why. On the far side of the terminal, through the gaps, another group of soldiers stood trapped between buses and barricades. Their path to the exit was cut off by the crowd, which surged and fell back, testing the line like surf on rocks. I recognized one of the trapped soldiers, the tall one who'd joked about me being late for duty that morning. He was easy to spot. Uniform crisp, beret at a perfect angle, trying his best to project calm. A bottle arced through the air and smashed at his feet, spraying glass. The crowd roared. Something hot and sour twisted in my chest. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket for my ID card, fingers closing around the familiar plastic edge. For a second, I imagined pushing through the crowd, flashing it, joining the line, shoulder to shoulder with the others. Then my captain's voice whispered in my head, "Today, it's about being a target." I looked down at myself. Plain shirt, jeans. I looked back at the crowd. Their eyes were on the uniforms. Their hands were throwing bottles, rocks, whatever they could grab. But not at people like me. Not yet. The first explosion wasn't big. I'd heard bigger in training, felt bigger in other countries. But sound behaves differently in a tight space full of panicked people. Someone threw a small homemade device, maybe a firecracker wrapped around something more serious, into the gap between the soldiers and the police line. It popped, bright and loud. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Everyone froze. Then the world shattered. The crowd surged forward, screaming. Police shields lifted. Stones flew. A bus window blew out, showering glass over the trapped soldiers. Someone shouted, "They're shooting! They're shooting!" even though no one had. Fear doesn't wait for facts. I saw my tall friend disappear under a wave of bodies as the crowd broke through. The line dissolved. The formation became a whirlpool. Uniforms, helmets, sticks, fists, flags. I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching the kind of chaos I'd been trained to control. Except this time, if I stepped in, I wouldn't just be another man in the mess. I would be exactly what everybody here hated. A hand grabbed my arm. I spun around, ready to fight, and found myself staring into my captain's eyes. He was in full uniform now, helmet slightly askew, sweat and dust streaking his face. "I told you to stay away from here," he shouted over the noise. "You told me not to wear the uniform." I shot back. "You didn't say anything about hiding at home." Even in that moment, he gave a tiny, exhausted smile. "That's exactly what I meant," he said. "But I knew you'd do this." Another rock whistled past and smashed into a pillar behind us. He pulled me back into the deeper shadow of the doorway. "Look out there," he said. "What do you see?" I looked. I saw uniforms being pelted with stones. I saw a young private swing his rifle like a club to keep people from grabbing it. I saw someone tear the emblem from a soldier's sleeve and hold it up like a trophy. I see my people getting torn apart, I said. So do they, he replied. Except to them. Your people are the ones who kicked down their neighbor's door last night. He grabbed my collar, forcing my eyes back to his. You think putting that uniform on right now would help anyone? I looked down at my clothes again. In this doorway, to anyone glancing our way, I was just some scared civilian being yelled at by a soldier. Out there, in the open, wearing the same cloth as the men in the line. I would be a symbol, not Armin, not a person, just a uniform. Another blast tore through the noise. People screamed. Smoke billowed from somewhere near the bus bay. Come with me, my captain said. We're pulling our guys back through the maintenance exit. I need eyes who aren't painted as targets right now. He shoved a radio into my hand. For the next 15 minutes, you're not a sergeant, he said. You're a ghost. Move through them, listen, guide us out. I swallowed, throat dry. How? I asked. He looked at my t-shirt, my jeans. By doing what you've hated doing your entire career, he said. By not being seen. Then he stepped back into the chaos, shouting orders, disappearing into the blur of green and smoke. The next 15 minutes felt longer than any patrol I'd ever walked. I slipped along the edge of the crowd, pressed against walls, ducked behind pillars. No one looked twice at me. They pushed past, faces twisted with anger, fear, grief. I heard words like justice, revenge, murderers. I heard names of people I'd never met, but had somehow been made responsible for. Through the radio, my captain's voice crackled. Unit 2, fall back to the east gate. Armin, what do you see? I craned my neck, scanning overheads, using bus mirrors, glass walls, any reflection I could find. Gates blocked, I said. But the service lane behind Base 6 is clear. If you move fast, you can cut through there before the crowd closes it. Copy, he replied. Keep watching. Don't engage. Twice, someone bumped into me hard enough to make me stumble. Both times I apologized in my best civilian voice and kept walking. Once, a man next to me screamed at a soldier who'd fallen, calling him a butcher, an animal. Spit flew from his mouth. He glanced at me, eyes wild, like he wanted me to agree. I nodded, just enough to satisfy him. Inside, my hands shook so badly I had to clench them into fists. On the far side of the terminal, I finally saw them. My captain, my tall friend from the bus stop, and half a dozen others, moving in a battered line towards the maintenance exit. They were limping, shields dented, uniforms torn, but they were moving. Gates clear, I whispered into the radio. You're good. Just don't stop. Copy that, my captain said. When we're out, you go the other way. Lose yourself in the city. I watched as they slipped through the narrow metal gate, one by one. A stone hit the wall inches from my head. I flinched, heart slamming against my ribs, and ducked back. A young boy, no older than 16, stood there, a rock in his hand, breathing hard. He stared at me, eyes flicking up and down, searching for something. No uniform, no badge, no target. Watch yourself, bye, he muttered. They're going to start shooting back soon. He wasn't warning me because he cared. He was warning me because, in his eyes, I was one of him. For the first time in my life, being mistaken felt like mercy. By the time I reached home, it was nearly 2 in the afternoon. The television in my parents' living room showed the aftermath at the terminal: broken glass, burned tires, police tape fluttering in the hot wind. The anchor's voice was calm, clinical. Sources say at least 4 soldiers were seriously injured when a section of the crowd broke through the cordon. Officials deny that any live rounds were fired. Tensions remain high across the city. They didn't show the part where a captain in a dusty uniform dragged his men out through a back gate because he'd had to treat them like cargo instead of comrades. They didn't show the part where a soldier in jeans and a t-shirt helped them escape by pretending not to exist. My phone buzzed. A message from Captain Malik. All accounted for. Some broken bones. No funerals today. You did well. Remember what you saw. I sank onto the couch and stared at my hands. They were clean. No blood. No dirt. But I couldn't stop seeing the way the crowd had looked at the uniforms, like they weren't fabric at all, like they were targets painted on human skin. People think a uniform is just clothing. They think it's a job, or a choice, or a side you pick. Most days, maybe they're right. But that morning, at 5 a.m., my captain pounded on my door and told me not to wear mine. By noon, I'd watched that same cloth turn men into walking bullseyes in the middle of their own city. I'd seen what hate does when it stops caring about faces and only sees colors, badges, shapes. My captain saved my life that day, not just by keeping me out of that line of fire, but by forcing me to see the war we were losing at home. Because once people stop seeing the person inside the uniform, it doesn't matter which flag you salute. You're just something to aim at. And some mornings, the bravest thing you can do is hang the uniform back up and walk out the door as nobody at all. If you were in my place that morning, would you have worn the uniform or not? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one. And if you want more stories like this, hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps these stories reach more people. What would you have done if your captain knocked at 5 a.m. and said, "Don't wear your uniform today"? Share your answer below. I'm reading all the comments.